What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Thought Leader Podcast. My name is Dylan Barr, your host, and this is the 7th episode of the Thought Leader Podcast, where we interview past and current thought leaders in the space of health, wealth, and relationships in hopes of reaching past, current, and most importantly, aspiring thought leaders in those spaces as well. People that have a message in their heart, have a mastery in their mind, and they are on the precipice, which is a word I've learned recently, on getting into the uncomfort zone and putting themselves out there. Our hopes is to interview people in the space so we could learn more about their story, how they got into it, what they have to teach us, and why they decided to get uncomfortable to reach you, to help you get your message out there. Today, we are speaking in the realm of wealth with my good friend, Tom Cox. Very excited for today's episode. Tom and I have been friends now for about a year and a half in our business accelerator program in Thought Leader. But a little bit about Thomas Cox. Do you go by Thomas or is it just Tom?
Just Tom.
A little bit about Thomas Cox. No, a little bit about Tom Cox. He's the founder of Vertical Motion, an organization that helps mid-career professionals become executives by leaning into their winning traits of authenticity, empathy, and audacity, which we're going to talk about today. He is a 2-time VC-backed startup founder and senior executive for the past 14 years. Tom has closed more than $1.5 billion with a B in business. A former senior executive in a publicly traded organization, U.S. Army veteran. Thank you so much for your service. And he has an MBA. He's just rubbing it in. Tom also holds several patents for his work in revolutionizing satellite communications. After recovering from leukemia in 2023, Tom retired from his 25-year space and satellite career to become an executive career coach for aspiring leaders. I've seen this man bald. I've seen him with hair. Tom has mentored hundreds of professionals and entrepreneurs for more than a decade and has been a mentor to the Patriot boot camp and Techstars communities since 2017. He lives in Atlanta with his wife and business partners of 20 years, Nicole. I watched her feed you soup the very first time I met you, and their 2 teenage sons, one of which is a huge astrophysics nerd. Tom Cox, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
It's great to be here, Dylan. It's good to hear you.
Oh, man, it's so good to see you. And from where we came originally to now you being on the podcast and the success you've had with Vertical Motion, I am so excited to learn about the journey here today. We're going to talk about the skills needed at the executive level, really what it takes, what people look for, what you've learned in the corporate industry versus the people that you work with now, all around the areas of wealth. So if you're somebody listening and you want to lean in more to wealth, you have a wealth mastery or message to get out there, or you're in a mid-level management role looking to make that jump to executive presence, today's for you. So I always like starting with a simple question. Our company is called Thought Leader, right? I think that word is very broad. I think it's very subjective. I think it means something different to each person, whether they're listening to it or on the podcast themselves. Tom Cox, what does it mean to be a thought leader to you?
To me, a thought leader is someone who has an idea or a vision about how the world should look. They have in their mind an idea or a concept of how people should engage with each other or how they should understand the world around them. And I think a thought leader is someone who can speak to a large audience and convey that idea and get that audience to understand and believe in that same idea. So someone who can do that, especially for positive ideas. And I think that thought leaders have a responsibility to help tell the world these visions, for the world that they have and convince them to help them build those visions.
Yeah, so really for you, it's like a 2-parter. One is seeing something, right? Like, hey, I see this idea or this thought that needs to be spread, which I think a lot of us could probably do. But to go further, you say the second part is having really the power or the courage to get it out there and to speak it directly so they can reach like-minded people, right? And really give that platform.
Yeah, because I mean, a thoughtful person would just have the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
A thought leader is someone who has the ideas and is comfortable being empowered to share them.
I love that. It puts more emphasis on the term leader, right?
Yeah.
Less on thought, which I always focused on the thought when I came into thought leader. I love that. You started, so I want to start with the story. I think stories shape time. I think they're powerful as all hell, right? I don't want to go all the way back to Tom as a baby. I'd like to start on the story to well, which is you were in the military. Thank you again for your service. And you shift into corporate America, right? Government contractor, government contract sales. Can you take me through that initial story of what got you on this path of wealth, to keep it broad?
Yeah. I mean, generally, I was a medic in the Army, and I wasn't a very good one. And I found that I wasn't, I got queasy when I was dealing
Mhm.
with blood and gore. And so I'm like, I need to do something different. I stumbled into satellite control and satellite command in the Army. Did that in the '90s, and then when I left the military, I went and found a great career in satellite communications, working on the outside, supporting global war on terror and some other things for the defense industry, and then ultimately for the commercial industry as well, long term. So I did that until 2010. And in 2010, I started my first venture backed company, which did mobile apps for the military. It was military applications on mobile devices, a really cool technology phase. The second startup was a couple of years later. That one was around building connectivity for refugees. So it was a tactical device that refugees could take to stay communicated as they, wandered north from difficult situations. And then so I did those two startups, and I kind of went back and forth in between working in the defense industry, did a startup, went back to the industry. So kind of was back and forth for several years, and even most recently, just left a corporate role to do this full time. So. I think I'm retired now, finally. I think I'm done stepping back into the corporate world,
Yeah.
but I have gone back and forth successfully over the years.
Yeah, retired loose term because I've talked to you about the work that you put in. But for what you're saying is retired from corporate, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't need to go back. Maybe you do one day, but you don't have to. So for you, it started with military. You had an affinity towards satellite. From there, that kind of led into some work that you could do after serving. And then that kind of bounced over to creating the apps, going back and forth in defense contracts, and then most recently in corporate America. You help people, I'd imagine, that are in corporate America for the most part. You are currently not. So you kind of have to tread on both paths. What do you feel is the biggest takeaway that you took from corporate America? What did it teach you in that journey?
I think it's amazing when you have an organization that's so large, what it can accomplish when everything is designed to do something. And so the larger an organization, the more capability and capacity it has. But most organizations don't actually operate efficiently.
Mm,
Startups, smaller businesses are more efficient just because the level of communication between a smaller team seems to be more efficient and effective. Larger organizations start to kind of crumble under their own weight. And that's a little like disappointing. You'd want to see large organizations, be efficient and what they could do. The other thing is that I think that I've seen a lot of growth in greed over my lifetime. So I'm a Gen Xer, and I remember, the first rounds of layoffs happening in the early '80s when Jack Welch, thought that was a cool thing to do, and then the '90s, and now we just live with layoffs. Like
mhm.
it's expected that layoffs are coming all the time. Like every month there's layoffs, and we're just okay with that. And so I feel like I've watched a lot of greed kind of pollute what large corporations are capable of doing. And instead of maximizing value for the community or the customers or the employees, they're only maximizing shareholder value. So that's a trend that I've seen in corporate America that kind of frustrates me and something that I want to push back against.
Yeah, really two main breakdowns of what you're seeing in corporate America. One being communication breakdowns, they're not running as efficient. And then the other one being really top end greed. Which one do you feel is the easier one to shift? And how would you do it if you were to stay in corporate America, which you're not?
Well, I think, we'll talk about what I do now a little bit, but I'll say that like my mission now is to address both of those. And I think you can do them all at once. And here's how. Um, the people responsible for the greed are responsible at the highest levels of corporations are basically very selfish people who are there, and their selfish interests align exactly with that of the shareholders. The shareholders want them to make them a ton of money this quarter, every quarter.
Yep.
And when you have people who are put in charge that are incentivized with these massive packages tied to the value of the stock, they're going to do things to maximize the value of the stock, which may be detrimental to the long-term prospects of that organization. We're seeing this play out live with Boeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jack Welch's acolytes have stripped that company down for 30 years, and we're watching the results of that over 30 years now, come to fruition. My sense is that the way to fix this is to put people in leadership who have the greater good in mind, that actually believe more than just in profit, but also people and planet and other stakeholders, maximizing value for as many people as possible, as opposed to just the shareholders. And I think that is the thing that we've gotten away from over the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, so it's almost shareholders rising somebody in an organization to the top that is going to do whatever they can to get that profit margin or that profit share up. And it's like ends can justify the means in a sense. To shift that, it's you have to get somebody with a different mindset in leadership. How do you then bridge that? And I want to talk about what you're doing now, but my last question here is how do you bridge that with the wants of the shareholders to get their money back right away, right? Like how do you let them deal with, hey, we have a more benevolent leader coming up that wants this company to grow? What's the pitch then to the shareholders?
How long do you want to hold on to your shares? Right. So, how comfortable,
Oh, that
how
was good, man.
good
Sorry, you just gave me chills. Keep going.
how good will your organization be in a couple years if you are stripping it bare right now, right? Like, again, go back to Boeing, and you can see the impact that these cost cuts have had on the quality of engineering and quality of production that are coming out of this once storied company.
Mm-hmm.
Doors are falling off of planes, people are dying,
Mm-hmm.
and who's accountable for that? Well, the leadership is. And the leadership is responsible for making sure that they deliver on the promise of the brand. When they don't, the brand suffers. And when the brand suffers, so does the value of the organization overall, its market cap. So if you want to hold on to shares of a company for more than a quarter, then you need to be planning beyond just the quarter for success.
So, if you're someone out there listening to this and you are a savant at teaching people the importance of delayed gratification, specifically shareholders, time to get outside your comfort zone. Man, thank you so much for that because it is. It's like you really have to promote this long term vision to shareholders and then what that leadership style has to be to get it, right? Once the sale is made on long term sustainable growth, then it's easy to say this is the best leader over the person that's going to do whatever they can to give us profits in the short term. Okay. But I also know now if we were to shift into what you're doing now, promotion, I'd love to know the story of how that came to be because I know you and it's not just you got sick of corporate greed or you got sick of the communication breakdown. What's the shift for you to now come into vertical motion? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so we might get a little woo, and I apologize in advance for doing so.
I don't.
And I'm not really a woo kind of guy, but my
You got a
experience
vest
is
on.
real. So in August of 2022, while I was a VP of Sales and Business Development for that public company, um, I, I fell sick with leukemia. And when I went to the hospital, they told me I had weeks left to live, and it didn't look good. And they're like, "Is your will in order?" Like this was a big shock for me. I'd been relatively healthy my entire life, and all of a sudden now I'm staring at my own death in less than 6 weeks. and they didn't really have a positive outlook for me at first. And so, I remember the day that they put the chemo bag, they put a tube into my chest that went straight to my heart. Because if they put this chemo for leukemia, it's so caustic. If they put it anywhere else in my body, it would melt my veins. So it has to go into the largest vein in your body, which is attached to your heart. So they put this tube, it's sticking out of my chest, and then they hook up this stuff called the red devil, which just sounds awful.
That
But
sounds
they hook this orange red fluid up, and I'm watching this fluid go into my chest. And the nurses that come in as like these like nuclear gowns that look like something out of a Simpsons episode, and hook this tube up, and they left. And I was sitting there, and I remember thinking to myself, but for this fluid, I'll be dead in weeks. And in that moment, I had an experience where, like, I felt very warm. I felt like I was inside of love. There was like a gold light around me. And in that moment, three things came to mind. One was that every day that I live after today is a gift that was never promised to me. And then the second thing that came to mind was that I forgive everyone that's ever hurt me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I do. I forgive everyone. Here's my dad. What do you think about him? And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, like, just sadness and pity, not anger. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then the third thought that I had, which I didn't understand at the time, was that you need to teach. And this all happened in the span of like a second or two. And
Mhm.
as fast as it happened, it was gone. And I've never been able to recreate that feeling or that experience since. But I'll never forget, it felt like a really great gift that was given to me. This
Mm.
sense of like connection to something larger. I knew in that moment I would survive cancer. It wasn't until 4 or 5 days later that the doctors came in and said, "Congratulations, you have a very rare genetic makeup that actually makes this chemotherapy work 10 times more effectively than it does for anyone else. And that's going to save your life." But
So
I had already known that I was going to survive, and I was now grappling with, what does it mean when whatever this was made me think I need to teach.
right. So you get a couple of weeks, right? You go through this red devil. Is that what it's called? Red
Red
devil.
Devil, yeah.
You know, this red devil therapy. Have this moment. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to ask is now, how do you keep yourself motivated? Right. You see a lot of people going through the chemo process, and it's like it is a mental battle to stay motivated and to keep the consistency. But then you have this moment where you have this knowing that you're like, hey, I'm getting out of it. And then you have the doctor say, your genes are like destined for this. Do you still feel you had to keep that like mindset in the right place and it was a mental battle? Or after that, was it a full feeling of, no, I know I'm going to get through this?
The physical effects of the chemo on top of the physical effects of the leukemia definitely took me down to a pretty dark point. And at some point I remember thinking, well, maybe I won't get out of this.
Mm,
And it was about 21 days into the treatment. There was about a 5 day period there. I don't remember. I was in and out of consciousness, delirious. I apparently was texting my wife from the hospital bed, and like if you read those texts, it makes no sense. So I was in a pretty dark place well after that moment. So I did kind of question, like, wow, am I really going to get through this or not? And ultimately, I did pull through, and I did so because at first it was for my family's sake. I wanted to see my children graduate. I wanted to spend more time with my wife. I wanted to live for them.
mm.
And then ultimately, over time, I started to pick up the fight more for myself, and that was a little bit of growth over a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine it starting with the people close to you first, especially being like that patriarch of the family of like, I want to stay for these guys, that, right? Then you get more selfish with it, rightfully so. This is why I want to stay for myself. When in the journey did it? Because one of the big things is you said the three was every day after this is a gift. I'm going to forgive all those that have wronged me. I'm going to forgive everybody, and I'm destined to teach. You didn't know what it was in the moment of this like glowingness, right? When did that come in, right? And how did it come in for you?
The teaching?
Yeah, like how did you know to teach people executive leadership? I want to teach people. I want to get to this executive presence. Like, where did this mastery kind of have that aha moment of this is what I want to teach?
Right. Yeah. It wasn't for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember thinking to myself, while I was recovering, I'm like, okay, I need to address this third point I'm supposed to teach. I don't know what that means. What do I teach? And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't want to go be a high school physics teacher. I'm not interested in being a college professor. Like, teaching didn't make a lot of sense to me. But when I kind of stepped back and thought about it, it's like, in my regular corporate work, I teach people every day on how to do things, and I can lean into that. And so initially, my thought was, let me figure out how to be a coach and coach people that I work with, employees, on how to be better employees, how to grow in their careers, right? Be that older brother that I didn't have in my career. So when I became an executive, I didn't know what I was doing. It was a complete mess, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have someone to look up to. And I thought, okay, well, I'll be that for people that work with me. And it was right about then, as I was thinking, okay, I should be a coach. What does it mean to be a coach? What do coaches look like? And right about then is when I saw, of all things, an ad of Taylor Conroy with a whiteboard in a jungle, drawing out a business model. And I'm like, it was enough for me to like watch the whole thing that led to a webinar. And it's like, okay, maybe I can teach through a TED talk. That was something that was, kind of top of mind. And it didn't really resonate fully with me to do that. But then a couple days later, I got an email from your team about Thought Leader, or I'm sorry, the Business Accelerator component. And I watched that webinar, and it was like, I knew this is exactly what I need to learn. I didn't understand what high ticket coaching was. I didn't understand how to build an audience. I've $1.5 billion in sales closed, all B2B or
Mm-hmm.
B2G, right? Like, very different selling style than B2C. So I didn't know how to do any of these things. And I remember when I watched that webinar, it was like, yeah, I don't know how much this costs, but I need to be inside of that. And when I signed up, it was like, oh, that's a lot of money. But you know what? I made that money back in 1 month when
I want
I,
to say in your first two calls, your first two sales calls, right?
yep,
Like
exactly.
two for two. I remember that, man. And you beat me to it. You're only selling B2B, B2G, right? Now coming into the B2C, like direct to consumer, but you knew you wanted to stay in the space of what you were naturally good at. And then it's like, hey, what seem to be the biggest challenges people have in this space? I had them when I came up to, executive level, leaning into that. And then obviously thought leader comes in. First it's TEDx talk, then it's business accelerator. And I said I would do this later, but it's just such a great tee up for our ad read. So today's ad read is actually brought to you by Jack Welch. No, I'm kidding.
No.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. This podcast is brought to you by Thought Leader. Over the last 8 years, this company has made it a mission to help its coaching and consulting clients get their authentic message out to the world in hopes of reaching their own desired audience through the power of speaking and business building. With over 650 clients landing TEDx talks, hundreds more speaking on virtual and physical stages around the world, Thought Leader has perfected the art of delivering a top tier message. They also offer programs to build and scale your high ticket program. This is exactly what Tom Cox came into, and how you can do it authentically so you can market and sell it to your target audience in order to build a sustainably scaled business. If you have a message in your heart or mastery in your mind and you wish to share it with your desired audience, click the link in the description below. Go see Taylor talk in the middle of the jungle in his tiny home. See what it leads to. Maybe it's our Thought Leader Accelerator helping you land TEDx talks. Maybe it's Business Accelerator, where you get to work with me. And Tom Cox is an alumni of it. We're going to talk about your success in a bit here. But I'm curious on something that you were telling me about. You call it the executive presence, right? You help mid-level management, right? Mid-tier managers grow to be ready for the executive level. of their career, right? And actually apply to roles. You've already had successful clients be able to go from mid-management to executive level. So take us through what the executive presence is that you talk about it, and is it important?
Yes. Okay. So executive presence generally, so let me back up just 1 second. I'll say this. There are 4 layers in any organization, whether it's a startup or a million-person corporation or even a government. The 4 layers are individual contributors who do the things. There are managers who manage the resources of the company, including the individual contributors. There's a third layer that is the executive layer. And a lot of people get the management and executive layers confused, or they combine them into one. And that's not true. Executives do very different things than managers do. And this is what I find primarily is the hardest mindset shift that I wind up teaching the most often is a mindset shift of recognizing that executives are forward thinking, they're outward looking, they are outside of the system, watching the system, deciding whether the system needs to change, improve, or be completely dismantled and replaced with something different, or not exist at all. So executives are looking at the business model and the opportunities and threats that are out there, whereas managers are inside the system, making sure that it functions efficiently and effectively. So managers are downward biased and executives are upward biased. Managers are inward, executives are outward. Managers are tend to be more critical and negative about things. Executives tend to be more optimistic about things. And so there's just different traits that make executives more effective than like just being a great manager doesn't mean that you'll be a good executive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So executive presence is this gravitas, this weight that someone carries in a room as a leader in an executive environment, in a corporate environment. So what does that mean? Well, there's 3 characteristics that really make up executive presence. The 3 most important ones. One is confidence. And so it's not just confidence in yourself, but it's your ability to project and portray confidence to others so that others feel confident in themselves. They feel confident in you and they feel confident in the situation that you're in. The other is decisiveness. And I find that a lot of my clients have difficulty making fast decisions. But the truth is that executives are always making decisions that they don't have enough time to make and they don't have enough information to make. So learning how to be decisive, making a choice, good or bad, just any choice, tends to be better than not making a choice at all. Because when you don't make a choice, you stand still and your perspective doesn't change. When you make a decision and it's the wrong one, you figure that out pretty quickly and you can turn around and go the other way as quickly as possible. So I find that uh, really confidence and decisiveness are those top 2 things. And then the third is more about communication and the ability to really empathize with your team. So communication is what the listener is doing. You can say words in a way that makes sense to you, but if they can't understand what you're saying, you're not communicating to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so great leaders learn how to say things 30 different ways because they're talking to 30 different people who think and understand in very different ways than one another. And when you get to a point where you can communicate, with someone um, whose thought process is almost the exact opposite of yours, where you're very logical, they're emotional, you're aggressive, they're a little bit slower paced, right? When you can communicate with them as equally and efficiently as you can with someone who thinks just like you, that is a very high level of executive communication. And those 3 things together really do help find this presence that ultimately makes someone who's a great executive just kind of stand out. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you think about like gravitas, this idea of like if you can imagine going to a restaurant and Brad Pitt is sitting there having dinner, well, there's going to be a buzz and an electricity in the room, right? That's kind of like, oh, Brad Pitt's over there.
Right.
And as soon as he leaves, the whole restaurant's energy will come down several notches. And that is presence, that is gravitas, and that is what really great executives create in the groups that they're leading.
So very important. Executive presence. Is it important? Yes. But I love this aspect of it, to separate management and at the executive level. Of executive, what I took away from it is like it's the visionary, right? We're forward thinking, proactive thinking. Management's going to be looking back, maybe sometimes reactive, but more inward. How is the team doing? And to step into that presence, three things, what I'm hearing: confidence, decisiveness, and communication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to get into the skills aspect of what you teach people next, because you talk about three skills people need. But before we get into that, like confidence, decisiveness, and communication, someone listening right now that's in the mid management position, what's one thing they could start weaving into their day to day to help them slowly get better at one of those three?
Yeah, let's just take confidence, because
Okay.
confidence makes up about 70% of what most people think someone with executive presence has. You can build confidence in yourself um, by just, I mean, there's a mental track that we play in our heads all the time, and so doing some positive reinforcement, reciting to yourself a mantra. I may not be perfect today, but I'm better than I was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
When you say that to yourself every day, day over and over and over, you start to believe that. And so just kind of filling yourself with positive reinforcement in the books that you read, the audio you listen to, the people you surround yourself with, just being mindful of your levels of confidence, invariably that which you measure will improve.
Yeah.
And as you grow in confidence in yourself, you'll start to change your posture. You'll start to change the way that you talk. You won't stutter as much. You'll be more clear spoken. Everything just gets better as you believe in yourself, because you're literally building your backbone as you go. And the more confidence is a great positive feedback loop, because when you are confident, you make the person you're talking to confident, who then in turn makes you more confident, and so on. And so just getting into that positive feedback loop will make so many things easier for you.
I love the answer because it does show how, if we want to make change, that it typically does start small. But you're already talking about the ripple effect there. I remember when I first got into business, it was all about self-talk, like how to change that internal mantra, which is your first step to anyone listening. But I love how you then say the more you do that, the more you build those routines, those mental habits as well, then the posture changes. Then the communication style changes. Then you have more confidence. Then you get better feedback. And it is all like small steps as you go through. I think a lot of people, which we're going to talk about as well here, they only think about the end goal. They don't think about these small tweaks that they can start to make now that, the person a year from now is going to thank us for. And speaking of books, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter. Great book for mental mantras. If anyone here is listening, it was big for me when I started. I want to get into the skills next, though. Tom, you talk about three skills that you teach for someone getting ready to shift from management, mid tier, to executive level. What are those three skills?
Yeah, we teach a lot of things, and I want to be clear that like the program includes a lot of like technical stuff, and here's how to do a strategy and things like that, right? But at a very high level, there are three traits that I think are incredibly important for anyone to be successful as an executive. And those traits are authenticity,
Mm.
empathy, and audacity. The authenticity is important because leaders need to be predictable. People need to understand who's leading them. When I understand how my leader thinks and what she's doing, why she's doing the things that she's doing, I feel safe. I can know, like, and trust her is the term that we use. Know, like, and trust, right? So I can know, like, and trust my leader if she's authentically who she says she are. If she's not authentic, if she's masking and I can't predict what her behaviors are, it'll lower the level of trust in her group, and that will lead to negative outcomes for everyone. So authenticity really drives the level of trust inside of an organization. The higher the level of trust, the more efficient and profitable and longer longevity that team will have over time. The empathy is important because it goes straight to communication. The ability to connect with someone at a level high in emotional quotient is way more important than an intelligence quotient when it comes to leadership. If you can win the hearts and minds of your team, the minds through the vision, but the hearts through, like, I see you, I see you, I understand you. Like, that's a really important part of leadership that I think a lot of people overlook. But if you talk to anyone who's worked with some of the recent great presidents, they'll tell you that when the president of the United States is looking you in the eyes for 45 seconds straight while you're talking to him, people remember that forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the best leaders in the world know how to build a very deep and empathetic connection with other people very quickly and very deeply. So empathy is a super important trait. And then finally, audacity, which is, I chose this word specifically because of, I remember Barack Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. And the way he used the word audacity really stuck with me because it's a positive connotation to a word that sometimes could mean something negative. I believe you have to have visions that are great and exciting in order to rally people towards whatever it is that your cause. Why build something small when you can build something great? Why build something that's, not worth it? Like, I'm not going to follow you unless you're building something that's audacious. And I think that leaders who believe in the right things and doing the right things, even in the face of adversity, when doing the wrong thing is easier and safer, those who have the audacity to believe in their morals and lean on their principles in that moment makes a great leader.
I mean, and it kind of comes back to what you were talking about initially when you see these, the way corporate America is run by greed. It's like they're not willing to be audacious of, no, I want to grow and I want to grow the right way and what that can do to the people following them. I was really curious about the audacity part when you first brought it up. It kind of gets the head to tilt a little bit. Great job by you. Great hook. And man, the empathy skill, I mean, directly correlates with the communication style you'll need to, like you said, talk to 30 different people in potentially 30 different ways. You need to know that person at a heart level. Really powerful. So let's throw this curveball at you. I'm in I'm in a company right now. Let's say I was mid tier. I don't want to play office politics, right? Yeah, I want a promotion. Yeah, I'd like to earn more. Yeah, I'd like to be in the seat. I don't want to play the office politics. I don't want to rub shoulders, to get it. Like, how do you win and keep that mindset?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked that. Yeah, like, we teach how to move your career forward without playing office politics. And generally speaking, the way that we do that is, so office politics are played by, there are two types of people who move up in corporate America. The first type are leaders that we've been talking about: authentic, empathetic, audacious people who have the greater good in mind. A high tide rises all boats, and all of that good stuff, right? Then there are the selfish manipulators that also move up equally as fast and far as great leaders. And you wind up with manipulators at the highest levels of organizations and even government from time to time. And so there are two paths to the top. We teach the first path, which is, you don't play politics, you just deliver, you just lead, you just be that executive. Because manipulators and people who are playing those office politics, they are cheating their way to the top. Invariably, invariably, they get found out. They always get found out for being a fraud. And they always wind up having to leave and go somewhere else and hoodwink a whole new generation of people. Leaders are drugged from place to place once they're identified. They're actually pulled from one role to the next, because you're so good. We want you on our team. We want you up here at this level. We want you over there now. And so there are two ways to the top. One is, look, if you want to be a manipulative person, go read the 48 laws of power and have at it. Go do the ridiculous handshake thing and, whatever. That's fine. But what we teach is, if you want to be an authentic person, if you want to be someone who's doing it the right way, don't play politics. Just be a great leader. And in doing so, just actually being good at what you do, being a great leader, being somebody that people admire and look up to, you will naturally float to the top
Mm.
as opposed to having to claw and scratch your way up.
Man, you answered my next question. Is like, once you get there for doing it the right way, how do you deal with these other people, right, that have manipulated? But they kind of get weeded out from what I'm hearing. And it's the difference of being poached, right? I actually want to pull you away from this company because I see your value versus someone that runs from a company because they got found out and then just started all over again. Man, I could sit here and talk for. We're already going late. You now hold the record for longest podcast, but it's just such valuable stuff. By the way, next podcast will be brought to you by Robert Greene, author of 48 Laws
Oh
of
my
Power.
God.
No, man, I'm the one using the names, not you. It's too meaty of a book for me. I really, really do appreciate this, and I know we are just talking about the surface of what you can teach people. You get into the nitty gritty with what you do. And if people do want to hear about this, right? Because let's talk about the sexy stuff on a podcast, which is what people need to know, the heart of your message, and then we can work on the technical stuff. If there's somebody out there that is a mid-level manager, they want to learn more. I know you have a bunch of free resources that you do. You're on different social platforms. What's the best way for someone to come into the ecosystem of Tom Cox? Because from what I've heard from people that have worked with you through your testimonials that you've shared is you're very authentic and it's easy to talk to you. It's not like this weird, I got to dress in a suit and tie to go talk with Tom. You're just authentically you. You wear a vest. How do people find you is my question.
Yeah, the two best ways to connect with me. I have a YouTube channel at Tom Cox VM, Victor Mike for vertical motion.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Cox VM on Instagram as well. And with YouTube, you'll see the long form content where I'm kind of explaining here's how you do this, here's how you do that, here's why you do these things. On Instagram, there's a bunch of reels that are a little bit more punchy, but you can direct message me and I will respond to messages on Instagram. So those are the two best ways to connect with me.
Awesome. And we'll put those links in the description below when this goes live. Man, you have had some success coming into Business Accelerator. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. You came in like full on, I'm taking my I know everything hat off and I'm going to be a student of the game. You come into the program, you say, what do I have to do? We lay out this path and say, just, work on those first 10 clients and this is how you'll do it. You follow it to a T. I believe you had your first 12 or 14 clients in like 6 months, over 100K that you made. And then we jump on a call, we make a couple more shifts. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you tell me if I'm wrong here. Recently, that was about 5 months ago. Recently, you just had your first $100,000 month, and you're on pace for your first $1 million year rolling 12 months. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Wow, man. Congratulations. And it's so easy again to see the destination. But I want to go back to the beginning because you were in a B2B sale. You were in a B2G sale. 1.5 billion, right? Like the really sexy words there, but you're getting ready to go B2C. You're getting ready to talk about a new concept. You're getting ready to go against the grain for people that what they view executive leadership and what you can teach them to get people results. Why? What was it in you? Why did you decide to get outside of that comfort zone?
I felt like I was leaning into this idea that I'm supposed to teach, and I was just following it. And you would tell me, okay, you need to go and post something on social media. And I'm like, I don't want to. I don't like social media. I haven't been on it in years. I want nothing to do with Instagram. I want nothing to do with TikTok and all of these things. And it was like, but they know how to do this. And if I want my message to reach lots of people, I have to do this. And my first reels were terrible. They're so bad. My first YouTube video is so bad. I haven't watched my own first YouTube video all the way through. It's 22 minutes. And so I think like it was just this sense that like they know better than me. Like you said, I'm a student here. Let me just play the role of student. If I get good at this and I don't like it, I can do something else. But I need to get good at it before I can decide whether I like it or not.
Got it. So for you, it's this glowing knowing that, hey, I'm here to teach. It's leaning into that even when you're scared, even when you don't want to do things. It's fully surrendering to being a student of the game. And were you really telling yourself, you're like, hey, if this doesn't work, I can always do something? Like, did that help as you went in to be like, yeah, I'll try it, TikTok, fuck it?
Yeah, I mean, it was once once I signed 2 clients up, very quickly, just following the scripts, following the process, following the flow. It's like, well, this works. So whether, whatever my opinions of this process are irrelevant because it works. And like, okay, well, if it works this well for me right now, and then I'm seeing other people in your program have tremendous success, Ro and her team, as an example, like, okay, well, if they can do that, I can do that too.
Hmm. And then I always follow it up with it. And I always like to say, put our egos aside, because I do want to talk to philosophical Tom here. Why do you feel people don't get outside their comfort zone? They have a message in their heart. They have a mastery. They know they're good at it, just like you knew you're good at this, executive. Why do you feel some people don't get outside that comfort zone?
Because we forget that we're going to die. That was the gift that cancer gave me, was the realization that a man has 2 lives, and he begins to live his second life the day he realizes he has only one. And in that moment, that's where I was in November when I found Taylor and Thought Leader and this whole community and this whole idea of coaching and all of this. And it was like, if I'm going to be a teacher, let's go be a teacher. Right now, to be a teacher, I have to be a student. Let me go do that. And it was because I knew that if I didn't, I'd go back to my job and I would have missed the opportunity to make a radical change in my life, to lean into my purpose, my true life purpose, which is what I think teaching, that moment, I feel like what was revealed to me was my life purpose, which was to teach leadership. And if I didn't just dive in head first, I wouldn't get all the way through it. And just that perspective of mortality, when you stare mortality in the face, a lot of things happen. And I felt like that was a gift that cancer gave me.
The last question I always leave to pose to you is then what would you tell other people, right, that are on that cusp of getting outside their comfort zone, right? If we could lean into this lesson of, hey, we're all gonna die, right, without someone having to go stand on the ledge of someplace to like what would you recommend someone does to remind themselves that? Is it simple, just like wake up and like, what would be your way to help somebody remind themselves this so they're willing to find their purpose?
If not now, when? Yesterday you said tomorrow, right? Like we all say the same things to ourselves, and we have these audacious ideas about who we can and should be. God forbid I ever meet the highest, most actualized version of myself. I will shriek away in shame when I see that version of me. And so I strive to be more like him. Um, but it's easy to just put those audacious ideas aside and just focus on the mundane and get back to Candy Crush and look at your emails and go to sleep and wake up and do it all over again until one day you can't do it anymore.
Mm.
Now is the time. If not now, when?
And we're going to leave it with that. If not now, when? For those listening, dare to be audacious. That's the biggest takeaway I have from it, because it's such a hooky word, right? You're thinking of the negative. Dare to be audacious. Dare to really lean into your purpose. We are all not going to be here forever. And the quicker we can lean into the fact that we want to leave that footprint of who we are, stamp our name, stamp our legacy when we're gone. Lean in now. If you are looking to be a leader in what you do, one, I'd recommend Tom Cox's program. We're going to put links so you can find them below. Working on the confidence, working on the decisiveness, working on the communication. And an easy way to start that is just changing the mantra of what we say to ourselves. And the more we do that, the more we lean into being our authentic selves, the more we lean into being our empathetic selves, and the more we lean into being audacious. We wish nothing but the best to those that are listening to this. Dare to be audacious and dare to start, I don't know, like right now. We'll see you at next episode.